Good afternoon. This is October 28th. I'm Kim Taylor, Chair of the Plan Committee of the Harbor Management Commission. I'm here at Sullivan Independence Hall in the first floor conference room with Commissioner Don Hyman, with former Commissioner and former Chair of the Commission, Mary Von Kanta. On the phone are Cheryl Beacock, former Commissioner, and Jeff Stedman, our consultant. Let's get this meeting underway. The first item on our agenda is to discuss the impact of the Cohen v. DEEP appellate decision on our efforts to update the plan. And I will quote to you from the decision, pretty much the sentence that says it all, which is, and I quote, any binding recommendation promulgated by a Harbor Management Commission, including recommendations concerning regulatory decisions, must refer to content already contained within an approved harbor management plan. And that is one of several times that the appellate court makes that statement in their decision from the appeal of the Superior Court decision. So in view of the fact that the court is suggesting that our power is severely, or to make recommendations is severely restricted if we don't have content relative to content that in the plan, is there anything that we can think about adding that we haven't added to date? Don?
Have we had legal counsel reaction to this decision and how it impacts us? Have there been any legal recommendations? I say that because it may be a simple matter of devising a language that is broad enough to give us the legal latitude to proceed without problems.
Great question. Jeff, I know you've talked to some...
might I just...
Please go ahead.
Say some things, because well, not that it matters that I've been involved with it, but I've been involved with this matter. It started in Greenwich, back in several years ago, and it stems. I might say first, though, that when this issue of the extent to which a Harbor Commission's recommendations are binding on DEEP, and the weight that DEEP must give to a Harbor Management Commission's recommendations, that's been an ongoing issue for many years. And DEEP has taken the argument that to be binding, it has to be a recommendation that's spelled out in the Harbor Management Plan. And that's distinguished from a recommendation of the Harbor Management Commission that the Commission might make when faced with a particular issue. And that was of much discussion when the town of Greenwich was preparing its Harbor Management Plan, which was approved by DEEP in 2017. And the Harbor Commission in Greenwich argued very strenuously. There was much negotiation that was ongoing. And DEEP agreed, finally, and this is what they approved what DEEP approved in the plan, that it is a recommendation of the Harbor Management Commission pursuant to the plan and supported by the policies of the plan that is binding on DEEP unless DEEP shows cause otherwise. So there's two things that come out of that. One, it's not a veto power over DEEP because they can still do what they have the final say. They just have to explain themselves if they take an action other than what's recommended by the Harbor Management Commission. And that's distinct from a recommendation of the plan. So what DEEP approved in the Greenwich plan was it's a recommendation of the Harbor Management Commission pursuant to the plan and supported by the policies of the plan. Subsequent to that, they approved, DEEP did, the same language in the West Haven plan and in the update to the East Line plan. So DEEP agreed that it's not feasible to think that we could add a recommendation in a harbor management plan to address everything that might happen afterwards. And for example, the Aquarian diversion project, which the Harbor Commission commented on, as in terms of its effect on the Mill River. We didn't have this. It wasn't possible, 5 years ago or 10 years ago to anticipate that diversion was going to happen and have a recommendation for it. But there are policies in the plan having to do with water quality, and so it's just not reasonable to think that you can update or have a plan have an answer to everything. And so what happened in Greenwich, subsequent to the approval of the plan, and then I'm sorry to go on about this, just cut me off if you want me to cut me off. But what happened in Greenwich is that the property owner applied to DEEP for a permit to build a dock. And in order to avoid issues with the town's zoning code, which specify that a dock has to be an accessory use to a principal site use, this particular property is not big enough to have another site use. So the applicant proposed and designed a dock that doesn't attach to the applicant's property. It begins as a short distance waterward of mean high water, and in the marsh. And so the Harbor Commission said that it could not make a favorable recommendation on this. They needed to understand what DEEP's policy is with respect to docks that don't attach to the land, in effect. And so the DEEP did not respond to that and issued the permit. And a neighbor who doesn't like the dock took this matter to the Superior Court and argued, among other things, that DEEP did not respond and properly address the Harbor Management Commission's comments. DEEP, with the Superior Court, argued that they didn't have to, because there was nothing in the plan that specifically addressed the dock at this property. Now that's in effect, they, in my opinion, reneged on what they agreed to in the approval of the plan. And the judge, the Superior Court judge, agreed with DEEP that there was nothing in the plan, and the recommendation has to be something that's specified in the plan ahead of time. And in addition, the Superior Court judge stated, or ruled, if that's the right word, that there's no authority in the first place for a Harbor Commission to even review and comment on DEEP applications, because it's not specified in the authorizing statutes. So that was all very troubling. And so the town of Greenwich, which argued in the Superior Court, joined the property owner's argument, then appealed this to the appellate court and argued that this is a loss or a diminution of municipal authority. And the appellate court decision, which came out last week, which Kim referred to, is 46 pages of, a lot of it is not relevant, but they in effect upheld what the Superior Court determined. Now what's happened, and I can't tell you, there was an executive session of the Harbor Management Commission in Greenwich, but when they came out of the executive session, they approved a motion to direct the law department to file the necessary paperwork to appeal the appellate court decision to the Connecticut Supreme Court. Now it may take, they said, several months for the Supreme Court to make a decision as to whether they will agree to hear this upon appeal. But one of the arguments to be made in the Supreme Court is that this is not just affecting Greenwich, it's affecting all of the Connecticut towns. And as an example of how this does affect the other towns, in Norwalk, and I apologize for going on and repeating myself maybe, but there's a gigantic project by the Connecticut Department of Transportation to replace the railroad bridge over the Norwalk River. And the Harbor Commission has been involved with this for 7 years now. It began in 2015 and has provided comments and thoughtful comments and recommendations. The project for the DEEP permit for this went to a public hearing. And in that hearing, the commission, again, Harbor Commission, submitted detailed comments and recommendations. The hearing officer, though, and this was before the appellate court came out. The hearing officer, though, responded by saying that they've received comments from the Harbor Commission, but pursuant to the Superior Court decision in the Cohen case, the recommendations of the Harbor Commission do not have any special standing, and they'll be considered as general public comments. And then the hearing officer went on to make what I believe others do, the most ridiculous comment that there was nothing specific in the harbor management plan about water quality issues associated with the replacement of the railroad bridge, which of course there's no way we could have came up with that, but the plan has a number of policies having to do with protection of water quality that may be the result of infrastructure projects or construction projects. So that's where we are. The other thing that we talked about is at the same time as this Supreme Court process is ongoing, and we don't know, whether the Supreme Court will even take the case. There's also, I think, it's appropriate to consider a legislative change, which would make clear that the harbor commissions have authority to review applications for deep permits, and to pursue a legislative remedy to this, which would in effect be no different or propose nothing different than what's not the typical, but what is the traditional and historic and ongoing process where municipalities review applications for deep permits. Other than that, it invalidates significant parts of all the harbor management plans, which talk about an important part of the Commission's authority and responsibility is to review applications for deep permits. So please forgive me for talking so long, but that's some of the background. And I think what we talked about this with Senator Wong and Representative McCarthy Vahey, and we were waiting to talk with them about it in more detail, pending the appellate court decision. So that's I'll stop now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jeff. My recollection is, as a result from our meeting with, with Representative Vahey, that she wanted, and I'm sure others would too, a 10-step, a 10-point summary of what our concerns are and where we would like them to go with any kind of legislative change.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and the other thing we learned is that this sort of legislative change would require review by the legislature's Environment Committee, and that DEEP has a significant role on the Environment Committee, and that we should anticipate that DEEP has not been agreeable to working with us on the legislative changes. But I think it's just not a misunderstanding, or whatever you call it, or a reaction, the term binding. But it's not, the recommendations really aren't binding of the commission. They're binding unless DEEP shows cause otherwise. So it's a question of the weight to which DEEP so that DEEP can still take an action or still make a decision contrary to the Harbor Commission's recommendation. They just have to explain themselves, and I don't know why that's so troublesome.
Well, what was interesting to me, Jeff, in the decision, the appellate court decision, they cited that unless that language, unless DEEP shows cause otherwise. They cited it in every single time they referred to that section of the legislation. So, but the appellate court never commented on that. They continued to say, distinguish between binding decisions on DEEP and recommendations to local bodies. So, for whatever reason, they chose to ignore that language. I guess my question for the committee at this point is, we're about 3/4 of the way through revising our plan, and I guess I'm more, I mean, however whether the Supreme Court decides to take it or not, we don't know. Whether we're able to affect a legislative change at this point, we don't know. All of those things are going to take at least another year, if not longer. And I guess what I'm wondering is there any feeling among the members of this committee, and certainly I'm going to be asking the same of the commissioners of the full HMC, is there anything we want to do now? Anything that we know of now? For example, do we want to say something about docks at Kenzie Point, other than the one that has been approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission? Is there anything else, any other items that are on people's minds that we could perhaps refer to in the plan that might, and who knows at this point, that might protect us down the road?
In other words,
Don?
I think you're suggesting, create a list of all of the projects that we might know about or could reasonably imagine, and word that list in such a broad enough way to give us the ability to regulate there, to act there, create such a list.
And I'm wondering specifically, again, back to the Kenzie Point, is if we refer to the decision by the zoning folks in town that there can only be one dock there. I mean, do we refer to that in the plan and say that it's inappropriate, the same way we've said it's inappropriate for there to be moorings out in that part of our jurisdiction? Do we say it's inappropriate for there to be, docks that don't attach to the land, that they're inappropriate for there to be more than one dock than the one dock approved by the planning and zoning people in Fairfield? That we have shellfish beds to protect, that we have conservation areas to protect. We certainly could cite environmental reasons out there, and I guess I'm just raising this would be the time for us to kind of brainstorm or begin to brainstorm if it's the feeling of the commissioners in this committee that we want to include additional sites in our environmental protection areas, in our environmental policies.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt Don or Cheryl or Mary, but my thought is, and maybe it's without thinking a whole lot, is that we don't want to do that, because then we're giving in to them, and the DEEP has to approve whatever amendments we make to the plan. And so that if we were to put in something to the plan to the effect that there won't be any more than one dock at Kenzie Point, that would have to be approved by DEEP. And then for the amendments to be approved by DEEP, then they approve that, but they would have to approve the plan that would otherwise be consistent with what they see is now the law. And that would mean we'd have to be removing from the plan the sections about recommendations from the Harbor Commission and review of applications to DEEP. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to explain myself.
Are you saying that our plan, for it to be legal, must also be approved by DEEP?
Oh yes, just like the original plan was approved by DEEP, any amendments have to be approved by DEEP. So they're not going to approve anything. They're not going to approve any amendments unless the rest of the stuff in the plan is now acceptable to them. So that way we're giving in to them. We want to maintain that authority to make recommendations and comments to DEEP, not just that the recommendations are binding, but that we have the authority to review DEEP applications in the first place. They're not going to approve anything unless it meets with what they think is the law now. I mean, they can say, "Oh, we'll still listen to you. We'll still listen to your recommendations," but they don't have any weight other than what DEEP decides themselves to accept. And what, jumping around here, but one of the arguments that the town will make if they get to the Supreme Court is that this doesn't just affect the town of Greenwich, it affects all the towns, the 27 harbor management plans that are made. So does it invalidate all of those plans that have been approved by DEEP and include a significant part of them is the process of application review of applications for DEEP permits and approvals? What the Superior Court judge said is there's no authority in the statutes to do that now. The only authority that's in the statutes for application review has to do with applications that are referred to the harbor commissions by the planning and zoning and land use agencies. That's specifically authorized in the legislation. But there's it's just been understood all along that why would you have a harbor management plan if you don't have a process to review DEEP applications? I just think that by trying to have something that's going to address all these different things, it's just given into them.
So you're recommending that we simply proceed with the updates that we've already done?
Yes. Yes, with what we think is appropriate, and then we argue with them or fight with them or however it is, or get the legislators on our side, hopefully. Otherwise, why the logic of having a plan that specifies every outcome? You know, there would be no need to have a harbor commission. You go to the book and say, okay, what's the answer here?
And you need a crystal ball to anticipate what those outcomes might be. I think that's an unnecessary use of time. I agree with Jeff's recommendation.
Mary?
That we do what we think is the right thing to do, and then pursue the. Well, anyway, that.
Okay,
I'm
Mary?
hearing this as nitpicking. And can you hear me, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay. I'm hearing this. Okay, we're nitpicking about a dock going into, did I hear you say an area where there's plants, where there are sea plants?
Yeah, it's a conservation area.
Conservation area. Okay, so using the legal language, whereas blah blah, you have a basic overarching goal to preserve those kinds of places up to a point. All right. And it's one way in Southport, it's another way in Bridgeport, it's a different way in Stamford, and it's up in Massachusetts somewhere. It's a wholly other different method. Everybody has a different situation they're trying to protect. But the overarching protection is to protect the environment in every sense of the word, not just the growing sense, but every sense of the word. So, one of the goals we might have for Southport Harbor, which is possible, not the end of the world, is to attempt in every possible way to balance the population of boats in the harbor so that they represent people from all walks of life, not just the affluent, okay? And because the Southport, and I'm saying this right now, I don't know whether I want to, Southport Harbor seems to have an overwhelming population right now of large boats and very little room for the smaller boats of people who might not have those larger boats. So it's an overarching idea. You have to resolve that overarching situation by what's your ultimate goal, which is to preserve as much as possible the comfort of the people, the comfort of the climate, the comfort of the property, so that things are working to the best way we know at this moment in time, facing climate change, facing blah, blah, blah. And this is what we're looking at right now. So is it a good idea to put a dock on top of a bunch of plants? The answer is no.
But that's not what we're...
Mary, that's not really the issue that I agree with you that we have to have those sorts of things in the harbor management plan. But the issue now is not that. It's not it's the effect of the court decision on the Harbor Management Commission's authority. and what is the extent to which DEEP must give weight or consider the Harbor Management Commission's recommendations. So I agree with you, all those things, and I think we have those in the plan now. But it's the question we have to discuss now is not the specific, environmental policies of the plan, unless you feel that there's a way to do a more detail, but how to respond to the court's decision having to do with the Harbor Commission's recommendations.
Well, but it sounds like Cheryl and Jeff anyway are suggesting that we simply proceed as we planned, and we take our revised plan, which is almost done, and we present it to DEEP and we see what they say. And when they start arguing with us or say that we don't like these things, well, then we come back to them and we deal with the specifics of things that they don't like, as opposed to trying to fill the plan with things that we think might, as Cheryl points out, in a crystal ball, might someday be issues.
Yeah.
And what Mary, I'm sorry, Don, sorry.
Related to all that we're talking about, is there a deadline for the Harbor Management Commission of Fairfield to submit its plan anywhere? And if there is, are we on track?
There's no deadline.
There's no deadline. So we have the time to wait for to learn whether the Supreme Court will hear this, and we have the time to continue to polish our language for the plan without any negative consequence. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, oh, yes. And the plan that we have.
Any pressure we're putting on ourselves is just.
We're putting on ourselves.
We're putting on ourselves. There's no legal.
Yes.
No.
Okay.
But we put this on ourselves a while ago. We have told the public we're working on this plan, and I mean it's been months.
It's been a couple of years.
But
right. Thank you.
Sure.
It's been a couple of years. So yeah, there's no legal commitment, but I mean we have self-imposed a timeline on ourselves. I think to be fair to the plan and to be the town.
Right.
I think. Yeah, I'm not saying that we shouldn't proceed with vigor towards finalizing the plan, but I suspect it's not been something that's been demanded month to month of CAM or anybody in town government, people chomping at the bit waiting for our plan revision.
No, and if you go back to January of 2020, or even before that, the summer of 19, when we did our survey, we said to the public who did our survey, these are 4 initiatives. One was to get online mooring, one was to do the survey, one was to update the plan, and the other were our dredging projects. So, I mean, as Cheryl points out, we committed to completing these tasks, and that these are going to be our priorities moving forward. So, but no legal consequence attached to the timing.
Do we know, by the way, is Greenwich also in the process of revising its plan? And do we know if Greenwich is acting, how Greenwich is acting in view of this decision per its plan? Jeff, you consultant that you are, is Greenwich in a similar position to us? Plan development?
No, because the Greenwich plan was approved 5 years ago. So the as far as the impetus to update it, they were reviewing it, but there's no timeline or deadline for them to do it. They were reviewing the plan and seeing if there's places where it can be updated. The principal thing that we were updating the plan for, besides just eliminating the things that we've already accomplished, was to include the plan for dredging the harbor and dealing with the sand spit. So we've been working with the Corps of Engineers, and our goal was that whatever the final plan to do that, and to restore the 100-foot width of the channel. That was like our most important project to include in the harbor management plan update, so that we could continue to do that in the future. So if DEEP DEEP approved our update that talks about maintaining and restoring the 100-foot wide channel, then they'd have to agree to that into the future. So we've been all sorts of delays, not all sorts, but things don't go as fast as you want. So we're now to the point where the Corps of Engineers is pretty close to having its design plan, if that's what you call it, for restoring that 100-foot wide width and placing the material offshore. That's the key thing that we've been waiting for to put forth an update to the plan. Not that the rest of this stuff and incorporating the online mooring and also we'd have to incorporate whatever we want to do with the lower wharf as well.
Right.
But that's what we've been working on really for updating the plan. The dredging aspect of it.
So, in summary, what I think I'm hearing is your recommendation, and perhaps the sense of the group here, is that we proceed with developing the plan as we have, getting the best information into it that we can, including the dredging discussion we just had. Simultaneously, we develop a briefing document for our legislators to see if there's a legislative remedy that might be considered. And simultaneously, we stay tuned to see if the Supreme Court is going to accept this case and rule on it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then there's one more thing. It seems to me, maybe it's been done and I don't know, or maybe it needs to be done. Are there legal people within the town of Fairfield, in town government, that we need to consult with? I don't know.
Well, that's. I was just going to say, and of course I'm interrupting you again, but the two other things that are related to that. If the Supreme Court should accept this case, then there will be an opportunity, according to the Greenwich Town Attorney's Office, for other towns to submit statements of support or whatever you call them as part of that Supreme.
Amicus brief.
Friend of the court.
Amicus briefs.
Yes. And so that's something that we should consider thinking about. But also, we're trying to organize a meeting, and we talked about it this morning with some other towns, of representatives of all the town harbor management commissions. We used to have annual meetings to that effect before the pandemic. So, but to have a meeting of all the interested parties, may have to do that via the computer, the Zoom stuff, but to organize that in the near future, so that we can try to get a coordinated response from everybody. But anyway, that's my blabbering on about this. But it's a very significant, my opinion. And in regard to Kenzie Point, it's interesting that the court made a specific statement, the appellate court, that an applicant can apply for and build a dock that doesn't attach to the property. It can be waterward of mean high water. And that affects the Kenzie Point stuff, the Kenzie Point matter, because of the five waterfront lots in the subdivision. As you remember, the statement was there will only be one dock, and that's because the subdivision doesn't allow any structures in the conservation restriction area. But that restriction area only goes to mean high water, the boundary of the private properties. So clearly, based on this case, an applicant could design a dock that just doesn't attach to the mean high water, and then you could have those docks out there. So if we could somehow address this, then you're right. One of the things we put in the harbor management plan is that pursuant to the subdivision requirements, there will only be one dock at this property. If we could support that, but anyway, that's getting a little off the track.
Okay, so if the consensus is that we just continue on, yes. I think that the action item that we have is to create a briefing document that Don referred to. That would be available to take all of this and put it into less than one page so that our legislators could understand better what's going on.
Yeah, briefing document, I heard 10 points specified by yourself, Jeff, or by Kristen.
Kristen said, could you give it to me in less than a page, 10 points in less than a page.
Yeah.
And I'm quoting her.
Yeah, that's a good discipline for us.
Yeah, that's a very good
discipline. Yes, because we have a briefing document, it's just that it's like 10 pages or 12 pages long. So yes, you just have to bring that down, and then that would be something that could go to all of the other harbor commissions as well, because it would not just be, something similar could be sent out to all the other harbor commissions.
So Jeff, you did put together the 10-page, and I'm exaggerating because I don't think it was 10 pages long. I think it was 4 or 5 pages long.
Okay.
Do you remember that? I remember.
Oh, yes.
Right? Perhaps that would be something that we should take a look at. And Don?
Boil it down.
Don could help us boil it down into 10 points in one page.
Southport Harbor, right? You're talking about a project in Southport Harbor.
No.
What are you
talking
about?
No.
We're talking about a briefing document regarding the issue of the implications of the court decision and what next steps might be to remedy that legislatively.
All right.
Yes.
So you take this document, it goes to a variety of courts.
No, we go to legislators.
You go to legislators and bypass the courts.
But there's a possibility that it might be a good idea to consider a change in the law. We don't know that that's right, but it might be, and we want to explore that.
This is an old project that's sitting there. That our current plan was developed in the
1995 it was approved.
It was approved, but it was worked on for about 20 to 15 years.
Right.
So it's and things have changed a lot since then.
Right, but we're trying to respond to the court decision that came out 2 months ago, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, something like that.
Which basically is to you, let the DEP do what they damn please. Excuse my friend.
Yeah.
Right. So
how do we change it?
I had the background report, and we also had a proposed legislative change at the time, and this one report is actually 15 pages. But I can go through all this and send it to everybody today, or that we were discussing, and Don can use his expertise to see if we can. Now this though is prepared prior to the appellate court decision. So I don't have that in there yet, but I'll send this out to everyone.
That would be great, Jeff. Don, I don't know if you heard, Don said the appellate court decision would be one line in the briefing document.
Yeah. And and again, we prepared a draft legislative statement or legislative proposal, and another one in this briefing document, we used one of the key examples was the Exide project. Now, we didn't envision this when we put the harbor management plan together, and this was the largest remediation project probably in town history. But the Harbor Commission was able to be involved in this process because of the policies in the plan having to do with the protection of water quality and fisheries resources. So you take this appellate court, and they could say your recommendations don't mean anything because you never said anything about how the Exide remediation should take place.
Right.
But I think what Senator Huang and Representative Leahy are looking for is just an overview of the issues. They don't want to get into the weeds on all this other stuff.
Yeah, no, they don't.
Yeah.
No.
Yep.
So, okay, so you're going to send that to everyone. We'll take a look at it. Don, I'm sure, will have some good ideas for us, so we can get ourselves organized to have a meeting with the legislators, or perhaps because it's election season, perhaps they won't have time to meet, but maybe even just to send it to them and go back after election and chat with them. But I'd like to move on. It's 20 of 4. I'd like to move on to the narration, because we're not going to settle the Cohen, the impact of the Cohen decision today. I'd like to move on to the narration project, which we unfortunately really didn't get very far with. The kids were excited. We talked about having 1 or 2 people talk to each other. The kids suggested that we might want to do some kind of filming in various locations around town, and that's really as far as we got. I know, Jeff, you and Doug broke down the presentation into chapters, and each with the idea that each of those chapters would be a segment, a self-contained segment, so that if, for example, if somebody wanted to know about the harbor master and what the harbor master does, they could go to our website and they would have a choice of several different segments on different topics to look at and listen to. They'd click on the one about the harbor master, and there would be our harbor master and perhaps someone else talking about the responsibilities of the harbor master, and that would be 5 minutes or 3 minutes or some short amount of time. And there would be other chapters that you and Doug identified, other segments that people could look at and listen to learn more about the history and the whatever of Southport. So do you remember the chapters, Jeff? Do you have those?
Well, we'll have to go back. I don't have them in front of me. I just say, not, I don't mean to interject myself all the time here, but we thought that this was going to be a sort of a complex effort that required audio-visual equipment, and we talked to Fair TV, and then somebody sent to me today that this should be a simple thing for us to do, and here's Microsoft support saying add and record audio such as music, narration, or sound bites to your PowerPoint presentation. So I think we could even do this ourselves through the PowerPoint program. And I also called a retired IT guy from the town this morning. He didn't call me back, but I think if we break up our chapters, we don't need sophisticated audio-visual equipment. We just need to figure out how to do it on our personal computers with the technology that's already available through the PowerPoint program. But I have to figure that out, or not figure it out. I have to give more thought to it.
Let me make a couple of comments. Let's step back from the discussion with the school kids. The first thing that we started talking about was to find a way to take the history of Southport Harbor presentation that you worked hard on, that has rich visual and verbal content, and make that a tool somehow that could easily sit on the town website and take people through the history of Southport Harbor, so that they were more supportive of the harbor management, so that people in the RTM and elsewhere knew what we were doing and what's at stake when we developed these plans, so that we have a modern tool that educated people on what the stakes are. And your presentation was a good starting place for that. That's, I think, what the broad need is to do. I am not well-intentioned as our high school kids and teachers may be. I don't think that is a good path to explore, because they have their own needs and agenda and requirement and school syllabus to conform to. Fitting in our program would be only a matter of luck, if they could. And the outcome would be also only a matter of luck if you want it. If you want to do this, if you want to create some kind of communication tool that does the kinds of things I'm looking at, we should either look at available software that can do that for us, or I would say create a budget to find a technical consultant to create this for us, because this is the kind of thing that if you want it done right, like dredging a harbor, like everything, everything else, you need to have professionals do this. And you and I could guess at this and so forth, but for, I think, a few $1,000s, you could probably find, we could find a few consultants that would do this for us.
And my suggestion is, well, again, interrupting, is the former IT guy in the town who has helped us with a number of things, who's now retired. If he could do this for us, I think that the cost would be reasonable, and at least he could tell us how we have to set this up, and if we need additional help, who could do it. That's Mr. Clancy.
Well, either that, or you go to somebody who one-stop shopping. You go to you identify a couple of consultants and you give them your presentation, Jeff, and say, okay, Mr. Ms. Consultant, we want to turn this into something that's user-friendly, that can live on the town website, and we want it to be working within 2 months. What would you suggest?
I love it.
Yep.
And just get it done.
Yes, I love it.
By professionals that know how to do this kind of thing.
I agree.
So, I mean...
Trevor Noah. He's doing that sort of stuff.
Trevor Noah would be great.
He would be great.
Do it as
How do we get his attention?
Yeah.
He's a little busy. He's looking for a job.
Yeah, he is. So Don, do you know some of these people?
I can identify. I would commit to identifying 2 or 3 consultants that we could consider. I have the names. I know the names of people who would know who to refer us to locally in town, that are already working on different town projects, that would know the kind of person that I'm talking about. I have no knowledge of any one person that could do this today, but I know people who could make suggestions to me.
Okay. And Jeff, your IT fellow.
Could be.
Yeah,
I mean,
I just want to, jump into it and get it.
I want to get it done. We've been talking about it for a year and a half, and we're nowhere. And I mean, Jeff did all that work. We have the work.
You have the raw material. It just needs to be repackaged in a way that works, and that in a world with limited attention span works quickly.
Right. And that was.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Jeff.
No, my thought is that I didn't realize that we could do this ourselves through the Microsoft program. And if we can do that, I don't think we need to go out to a professional consultant. We just do it ourselves right away, if we could figure out how to do it.
Well,
but that's the key thing. Figuring out how to do it.
Yeah.
You then put it into a category of execution where it might be good, it might not be good.
Yeah. And I can't do it. I'm not that good. I can't figure that stuff out. I don't have any experience producing a work like that people view and can understand. And I don't think it's fair to ask any of the commissioners to go ahead and do that when we want something. When we go, if we have to go to the RTM and the select the board of select men to sell our plan, to beg for money to do the cost share part for the lower wharf, to potentially beg for more money to deal with the dredging of the 100-foot channel. We need to have something pretty quickly, and we need to have something that looks really good. And if our amateurs have put that together, I think is taking a risk.
Yeah.
And if we could do it for a couple of $1,000s, I think that's money well spent, because that's the kind of thing that could exist for a very long time and educate a lot of people who have not yet been elected to office, who've not yet been appointed to commissions. I just think it'd be money well spent.
I agree, Kim.
Could you give me until Monday to figure out how to do this, and then proceed how you wish to? I'm just wondering if we bring in a professional media consultant and so forth. It's going to be a significant amount, and then I think we want to make our own voices on this with the chair and the harbor master. And
not necessarily. I would disagree on that. I think, I think, to me, the whole idea of narration by anybody on the commission is that what works is, and that, do any of us have radio quality, national public radio voices, that could be useful here? I think you need to step back and look at what's the most professional tool that we can create for a reasonable amount of money. And we're talking, I'm just going to throw out a number, under $5,000. I don't know what it'll cost, but I think if that is a number that we can, because you have to have numbers to talk to any professional, we should look at that. I mean, we're talking about creating something of enduring power and value. It should be done right.
I agree, and I think if there's too much variation in voices, people, I don't know, I would hate to have put a lot of effort into this and then have people turned off because it doesn't grab them, whereas a professionally prepared product likely would grab people and hold their attention.
Right. But to do this now, we'll have. Oh, sorry, Cheryl.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Jeff.
But also the first thing we have to do is we will have to remove the graphic text from the slides, and so there'll have to be a script that will be prepared to be read by someone who doesn't have an understanding of what this is. So it's got to be more than just reading taking the text off each slide and saying to somebody to read that text. But anyway, however you wish to proceed.
You've created all the words we'd ever need and the images. It's a matter of repackaging it and reformatting it, if that's necessary, into something that works.
I think it would be repackaging it too, because the way the slides are set up, the slides are set up so that there's a space for the text. So to revise that, we'd have to, enlarge the slide and have the slide just be the image without the text. I mean, that's not hard. It's just time consuming. But the question is the text, is that what someone would then read into the? No, anyway, we will figure it out. I mean, however you wish to proceed, however you wish to do it, I'll still find out over this weekend how you do the things, how you would do this.
Jeff, I think if you and Mr. Clancy want to get together and talk about it and look at the Microsoft packaging and put your head, come up with some ideas, I think that's great. But I think at the same time, if Don can identify one or two others, then we have some choices about how we're going to do it.
What I would do is give your presentation to a couple of people and tell them what we need done, and ask them if they could make some initial suggestions and, what it might cost for them to do it if they went further.
Yeah, I think very good.
I think proceeding on both fronts at this point, it would be the way to go. And we make our final or other decisions after we have more information. Yeah, but at this point, all we know is that Microsoft has some things that a professional might use as well. And I just really don't want to have members of this committee become technical presenters, or put together do the technical work and the presentation work. I mean, that's not what any of us are.
Right, and the school, the school kids and they have ideas. Of course they have ideas, and their teacher has ideas, but they don't have the time to execute, nor is this going to be a priority for them.
Right, and that's, I mean, unfortunately, that happened, and we now know it, and.
Right, so that's off the table. So we have two options going forward, which we've just discussed, right? Do we want to put a timeline on it, Kim? Like, let's put a drop dead date by which we make a selection of which way to go?
Well, I'd love to have the selection by Thanksgiving, the week after. That's like a month.
By the end of November.
The end of November.
So here's a question. If we're spending money, do we need to write an RFP for outside support to help us? In which case you have to give them time to submit a proposal, and does sourcing need to get in the middle of this?
You know, it's a very small amount, Cheryl.
Okay.
And I believe $12,000 is the number, above which you need to get town, that you have to go competitive bid and all sorts of purchasing requirements. But once you keep it below 12,000, you can pretty much spend it.
Yeah, and we're not quite at the RFP stage because, you know, I may not be able to find a consultant, and Jeff's person may say thanks but no thanks. You know, we need to do a little bit more homework before we can ask someone for a proposal.
Right.
I agree. My point about that was if that would be required, and it sounds like we're not going to be at the financial threshold where it would be, that
I don't think so.
Our deadline of Thanksgiving, that's not going to be realistic. There are too many steps to take if that were to be the case.
Yeah.
But I do think we should have some sort of time horizon where we want to get this thing kicked off, or we'll be sitting here next year at the same time talking about this.
I agree. I'll ask everybody, but by the end of the month to have some additional information of who could do what for and how much. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, let's have another maybe.
You know, in Westport, Fairfield, Southport, there are all kinds of people who work for television.
Sure.
Right.
Who work, and I have two living in my building right now.
So, I mean, it's a meeting to discuss what our next, agree by the end of the month on what our next steps are.
Right. Good.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something there's some time element in that, but yes, it's broad enough to give everybody a chance to participate.
I mean, in terms of a longer time frame, I'd love to have this done before, as Brian is sending out mooring permits next week. I mean, when people start to think about the harbor again and being there, it would be fabulous.
Yeah.
If we could have it done.
I'm looking at the presentation now, and there are 35 slides, and pretty much on every slide, the text is about half of the area of the slide.
Maybe that needs to change.
Some of the slides have more than one image on them.
Yeah.
So there will be a substantial effort to redesign this, so that we take off the. But you're right, Don. That there's substantial text on this that may but be adequate in itself to be the script of it. But we'll have to change the design of this so that it looks good without the text on the slide. And
you've got great images. Yeah, you've got great images, and that can be very powerful, I think. And one thing I would say about text in general, in my experience, less is more.
Oh no! Right. I think if someone's going to narrate this, I'm saying take the text off the slides and just have maybe a caption of some sort, and then the text that is on the slide now becomes the basis of the script.
All things are possible.
I can work on that.
I don't want to design it until I talk to somebody who knows which tools are available to us and how to use them quickly.
Right. And I not to again say that. I think I also know someone who could do this for us at a reasonable price.
Great. Let's do it. Let's let's get it done by year end to have a plan in place and people on board, and
I'll tell you what. By Monday, I'll have a cost of this for you, because
Okay, good.
And it won't be my friend who used to announce for NBC television, because I would have, but anyway, I'm teasing, but he lost his voice, which is unfortunate. But anyway, thank you for letting me talk so much in this meeting. I'm sorry.
Glad to hear from you, Jeff.
There's many interesting things, and including the optimism of that the Corps of Engineers is going to move forward with the dredging project. We've got to get the permits next year, but anyway, that wasn't the topic for this meeting.
It's exciting. So, any other thoughts? If we're working on the narration project. We'll meet towards the end of November and talk about who can do what for how much, or some combination thereof. Jeff, you're going to send us the briefing.
Yes.
Background document on the Cohen case, and with the idea that we can begin to think about perhaps a briefing document. I think that probably has a longer window, if you will. That's less immediate than the getting on with the narration project, given the fact that we've got an election before us, and probably our legislators will not have much time to the next couple of months to.
The other thing that Representative McCarthy mentioned to us, that there is an informal group of the legislature called the Coastal Caucus.
Right.
Now that's different than the Environment Committee, but she suggested, when we first talked with her about this, that it might be appropriate to request a meeting of that Coastal Caucus to raise this as an issue. And then if we could get support from those members of the legislature, that would help us in going before the Environment Committee.
That's a good idea.
We'll pursue that.
Yeah, and I think we'd need to have a briefing paper before we met with the Coastal Caucus.
Oh yes.
Right.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So anybody have anything else they want to add or suggest or?
No. I have a question.
Mary has a question.
Have you gotten any information as to where they would be placing the remains of the sandbar out there in the harbor, where it's going to go?
Mary's question was, where's the sand that it gets dredged from the country club bump there? Where's it going to go? And at the moment, the Corps is exploring whether all or some of it will go out to replenish the oyster beds off of Southport Beach. There's a possibility that some of it may be used to replenish Sasco Beach, and that how much, and if any, in fact, depends on how much of the sand is, what's the quantity of sand between the low water and high water mark, and the Corps is in the process of calculating that.
And that's a really good question. And my question would be, would that be the signal moment once the Corps comes to agreement on that, when we have some kind of a broad announcement like we saw in Westport of what our dredging future might look like? What is the signal moment is my question for when we do announce that, dredging is in the works. We don't have the exact timetable, but here's what's going on, and we announce what we can announce. I don't know when that is.
I don't know when it is either. We met with them yesterday, and Jeff and I and the harbor master, and there is, at the moment, there is no date. There is no date. The Currituck, which they believe will be doing the work, has been in dry dock for 2 years, and there's a substantial number of projects that are backlogged. There was some talk about January of '24 as a possible date, but there's some chores that the Corps has yet to complete before they can begin to get closer to scheduling. And some of those chores involve the country club, involve the decisions about where the sand will be dumped, involve whether or not we, the commission, or we, the town, will be responsible for some additional costs to truck the sand around. It still seems like an awful long way away to me. And I hate to get people excited about something that isn't going to happen for a year and a half.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Right? And so
I agree too. I guess what I'm looking for is you ought to, and Jeff ought to think about what will be the moment in the process when we can, because that will be a powerful moment for us. Westport talked about it with none of the specificity that you're talking about now. That's their business. We want to be a little more accountable, I gather, and have some specificity. And I would say we ought to just think about what that moment is.
Okay.
What has to happen on the Army side for us to be able to make an announcement. That's all.
Okay, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a significant or some amount of skepticism about the ability of this commission to get involved in projects that actually get done.
There's a huge amount of skepticism, and it's not anyone on this commission's fault, but there's huge skepticism because nothing's happened.
Right. So I want to be very sensitive to that and not announce until we put this commission's years worth of efforts in its best light to the public.
Okay.
To the public. So in my opinion, we're not there yet. I don't know, Jeff, if you think we are, but it just still seems to be very. It's going to happen? Yeah. When? Who knows?
I would just offer this. Sometimes groups like ours can use that can use public pressure to make others act more rapidly, because there is such interest in dredging.
Right.
On the other hand, that's a whole exercise in brinksmanship, which we may not be prepared for.
Right.
But I just keep looking at and thinking about the story that we all saw about Westport's situation, and they're not anywhere nearer to it than we are, it would seem.
Right.
Do they have an advantage because they've created some publicity, and that the Army Corps of Engineers knows that and knows that they're expecting a decision? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I don't know, I mean, I was amazed to see that congressmen and senators had been there, whereas ours has been actually approved. The congressmen and senators had to actually vote on the money, and there's been the money that's going to be used to dredge the harbor came from Congress. And so those guys presumably voted on it, and presumably...
What Congress? The National Congress?
Yeah. The money for the dredging, whenever it happens, is a congressional appropriation.
And yet nobody is, to the best of my knowledge, and maybe they've called the first select woman's office, but to the best of my knowledge, there's been no interest, no effort to make a connection from any of the Congress people with us. And I don't know, is that maybe where we start?
You should reach out to them.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Could you ask them? I mean, is that a discussion to have with their staff? We want to accelerate this, and can you help us? You've already approved the appropriation. I don't.
It'll depend.
I think the only help that we need to accelerate anything is help. It's not help, but the assistance is with DEEP when they review the submittal by the Corps of Engineers. That we're not going to get the Corps of Engineers to work any faster on this by trying to seek publicity, and I would discourage that. But at such time as, and hopefully that will be not too far in the future, when they submit an application to DEEP for approval of this, that's where I think we may run into potential issues with DEEP's approval. But we haven't got to that point yet. And then as far as the article about the Westport dredging, without going into that anymore, that the relative advancement of our project relative to that, and the need for our project relative to that, and what the likely outcome is going to be. There's no comparison, I don't believe, between our project and theirs. But that's another story. How they got the positive publicity, and don't discourage, don't. But anyway.
But you know what? Maybe, Jeff, one of the things we need to think about is just as we're putting together a briefing paper for our representatives vis-a-vis and for efforts vis-a-vis the Cohen decision, perhaps we should begin to think about, a few points to put together for our state representatives about the dredging project. Because if DEEP is going to be the one, is the organization that's going to give the green light to the Army Corps of Engineers, then certainly our senators in Washington don't have a lot of clout with DEEP, but our representatives in Hartford do. And those folks, I doubt seriously that those folks have any idea that we're considering a dredging, that the Corps is going to dredge, and what the impact of the dredging is, or what the complications, all the complexities of all the parties and all of the issues that have to be resolved before they can do it are.
And maybe that is the moment for, let's call it, external communication. That is to say, when the Army submits its application to DEEP, that's the moment when we start strategizing on external communication, whether it's to lawmakers, news media, opinion leaders in town, in the voting community, others. But that is the act that precipitates external communication, not just
and not to go on into historical stuff, but it's sort of amusing because 20 years ago, all of the issues that we had with DEEP to approve the dredging project in 2004, and all of the arguments and we had over the removal of the sand spit, and which DEEP wouldn't allow us to do. And I'll always remember when someone at DEEP told me, if you go to the governor on this, we'll put your application at the bottom of the pile. Well, anyway, that's sort of funny, I guess. But
that's kind of scary.
So we have to be careful about how we do this. But to have positive publicity about that we're working on this, and that's certainly something that we want to work towards. And again, our project is I don't know how many times more significant than the Westport project, but the politicians got their pictures in the newspaper for that.
Might be someone in Westport that would argue that, but I agree.
Those merchants on Main Street there, yeah.
Is there any way that
but Mary, how do they get the boats up there?
Well, it's only going to be dredged to 4 feet. It's unbelievable to think that there'd be a whole.
And they have to get through. They have to get through the Bridge Street Bridge.
Yeah. Mary, you had a question?
I'm just thinking of many of the problems. Have the oyster people been talked to about this possible situation?
Oh yeah.
Do we have a good chart of the current direction coming and going in and out of the harbor? Because we know that there's an enormous amount of sand being deposited at the mouth of harbor and next to Sasko Beach constantly.
Right, and Race did some engineering studies and about what some of those amounts are, and the sand itself that we dredge is going to go out to make oyster beds possible offshore, off of Southport Beach. And the state
Where
aquaculture,
offshore?
off Southport Beach, right around Buoy A. And the
They're gonna
aquaculture,
take it from Southport Beach, which is.
no, they're gonna take it from the country club and dump it out there by
Yeah.
A.
All right.
And the aquaculture, Jeff has got the fellow who is the head of aquaculture for the state, who's gonna write a letter to DEEP in support of that.
Yeah.
So, and
So they can expand the oyster fields out from the beach.
yes.
And they can expand wherever Pequot Yacht Club is doing its sailboat racing out further into.
Well, it won't matter because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The racing, doesn't impact the oysters.
Well, it impacts the oyster people who work there.
Oh, it will impact, but yeah.
And that all
But-
has to be
Right.
thought about.
And but the aquaculture folks are on it.
Yeah, okay.
So, any other additional thoughts, comments, suggestions?
Just try and make the thing funny.
Just try and make it funny.
Try and get some kick and spit and piss in it and make it a little lively.
Make it lively.
Well, lively, yeah. So what my to-do is, I just wrote a note to myself, Don, send Jeff's deck to 2 to 3 folks in order to determine the names of consultants that could, in turn, develop that deck into a online presentation. Have those people brief me on what they think might be next steps. Report back on those possible next steps. All this is free at this point.
Right.
In terms of for a planning committee meeting by the end of November.
Right.
And then at that same meeting, Jeff will share what he's learned from the person he was mentioning before, the retired town IT consultant.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll share that with you on Monday because I think I'll have that.
Okay. And I don't have a calendar in front of me, and my plan right now would be just after Thanksgiving to call another meeting.
Yep.
Sounds good, Kim.
As opposed to after Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving
is the 24th. The 24th. So that first
Friday? No, Friday is
Yeah.
usually
right the day after Thanksgiving. I'm out of town on the 2nd.
Yeah, a lot of family are visiting.
Yeah.
Maybe it's this week sometime.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do it that right after Thanksgiving then. Okay.
The last
All right.
week in November.
Last week in November. Yeah, so
Time to be determined.
yes.
When they don't have physical therapy.
Okay, if I don't hear any other questions, thoughts, then thank you all and have a good weekend.